In the last few years, because of the advances in radio technology, the scientists have actually been able to discover quite a lot of really unusual objects and quite a lot of new interesting mysteries when it comes to radio signals. And just like that, very recently, only a few days ago from when I'm making this video, the scientists seem to have discovered yet another unusual, unexplained, and somewhat powerful radio signal coming from a relatively nearby galaxy. A radio signal that currently does not have a very good explanation, although the scientists do provide at least one possible explanation, at least based on our current understanding of various radio signals somewhere out there in the universe. And so, hello wonderful person, this is Anton, and today we're going to be discussing this new unusual source and try to figure out exactly what it is, and obviously talk about what it's not. And let's start with that. It's very likely not aliens. To date, none of the radio signals we've found so far exhibited what you would expect from an artificial source. Pretty much every single radio signal we've discovered so far is just a little bit too unpredictable and a little bit too hectic, features that you expect from a natural source. But despite of that, there are still a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to the variety of radio signals we've detected in the last few years. And once again, mostly because the radio telescopes have now become so extremely powerful. And though normally in the past we would usually have some kind of a theoretical explanation to what we're observing, as a matter of fact that's exactly how most of the previous detections have been explained, we've now reached a point where we're actually getting a lot more data from various telescopes than there are currently theories available to explain what's being seen. And also even looking for various explanations or for various studies and papers, for example online through sources like the Archive, the incredible service ran by the Cornell University, where I basically usually get all of the studies as well, have sort of become oversaturated with the amount of different releases and various papers. Every single day in astrophysics alone, there are at least 100 different papers. And because of this, matching a phenomenon to a potential theory has become a bit of a challenge. And that's exactly what's happening with things like, for example, fast radio bursts, or the more recently discovered odd radio circles that we discussed in one of the previous videos, with this maybe even now having some kind of an explanation. But this new discovery, coming from a galaxy known as NGC 2082, located approximately 60 million light years away from us, really highlights some of the challenges in modern astronomy. Even though this galaxy is relatively close to us compared to some of the other galaxies, it's been practically unexplored and has never really been studied by almost anyone. And if we were to take a look at where it's located compared to the Milky Way, it's somewhere in this region, roughly around 60 million light years away. It's basically somewhere right here. And so in some sense, this is one of the neighboring galaxies. Yet despite this galaxy has only been looked at once back in 1992 when there was a supernova detected coming from this region. Other than that, it's very difficult to find anything about it. And that's exactly why the scientists behind this paper decided to focus on this galaxy, because they wanted to explore some of the more unexplored regions in the night skies, and the galaxy is relatively close to us, nobody really studied before. NGC 2082 is one such galaxy, although there are quite a lot still unexplored. And pretty much right away, the scientists behind the study you can find in the description below were able to find this previously unseen radio source that was actually pretty powerful, but unseen simply because nobody ever looked here. Discovered using the very powerful Australia Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder, along with the Parkes Radio Telescope and the Australia Telescope Compact Array. A relatively large network of really powerful radio telescopes, which already have discovered a lot of radio mysteries in the last decade. And so what exactly do we know about the signal and about the galaxy where all of this is coming from? Well, first of all, as I mentioned before, not much is known about the galaxy itself. NGC 2082 is one of thousands of different galaxies in the so-called New General Catalog, commonly abbreviated to NGC. And of thousands of galaxies on the list, there are still quite a lot that haven't really been explored by anyone. But we do know some things about this based on the Hubble imagery. First of all, this galaxy seems to have quite a lot of individual bright blue stars, which obviously suggests that there is quite a lot of star formation. And one of these stars went supernova back in 1992. We also understand that this spiral galaxy seems to have a relatively dense central bulge right in the middle of the galaxy, and quite a lot of different filaments of dark dust that seems to be located in its spiral arms. Although honestly none of these features are unusual, and a lot of different spiral galaxies with spiral arms will often contain them. But somewhere in the middle of the galaxy, a little bit off one of its arms, there is an unusually strong radio signal, emitting relatively large amounts of radio waves. But at the moment, because of the strength of the signal, it's really hard to explain it. For example, if this signal was coming from a nearby galaxy or much closer to us, even within the Milky Way, we would probably explain this as a pulsar or possibly some other radioneutron star. Or maybe an even more unusual phenomenon, sometimes known as the plurion or pulsar wind, which is usually formed by various pulsars interacting with a lot of gas in the region. In this case, interacting with the cloud nearby. Or it could also be coming from certain types of nebula, but once again they would have to be much closer. And so normally, in order to produce these powerful radio signals from this far away, you would require some kind of a supermassive black hole with quite a lot of power on the inside to drive all of these radio emissions. And so normally these types of powerful signals are observed coming from radio galaxies such as the iconic Hercules A we've discussed relatively recently, or some more powerful objects such as distant quasars, objects that are billions and billions of years old. But this is not a radio galaxy, nor is it a quasar, so what exactly is happening here? And also, as you can see, this is not in the center of this galaxy either. So unless there is some kind of a supermassive black hole in this region, which by the way is a possibility, at the moment this is still a bit of a mystery. But there are some clues based on the polarization and based on the size of the object that's emitting this. So here, by analyzing polarization of light coming from this radio signal, and by studying the frequency along with the overall power, the scientists definitively determined that this cannot be coming from a relatively large object such as, for example, a nebula. This has to be a somewhat compact object. In other words, it has to be really small. And based on the frequency and the emission type, they also don't think it's a supernova remnant or any kind of a pulsar either. As a matter of fact, they think it's a source that has a lot of heat, with the radio emissions possibly having thermal origin as a source. And based on the location of this particular signal, it also seems to have certain similarities with fast radio bursts. But it doesn't seem to be as bright as a typical FRB, and doesn't possess the same type of repetition or the same type of a profile. And so by process of elimination, the scientists were left with only one potential explanation, although it's not really clear if it's the best one just yet. The explanation here is, I guess, not super exciting. So it could be a quasar, or even some kind of a radio galaxy, simply located behind NGC 2082, with its jets piercing through this galaxy and thus sort of making it look like it's coming from the galaxy itself. In other words, the explanation here is that it's not really coming from this galaxy at all, but from somewhere behind it. And because of the amount of polarization in certain frequencies that's also observed in various radio galaxies and various quasars, to some extent this does maybe provide the explanation. But a lot more confirmation is needed before this can be established. For example, looking at various types of neutral atomic hydrogen, which could maybe confirm these assumptions by looking at the interaction between hydrogen and the radio signals. But since the probability of such an object being behind a galaxy is only about 1.2%, at the moment the scientists are not sure if this is really the best explanation. Because, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, we've kind of reached the point where the theories can no longer catch up with the observations, and in some cases it's very difficult to find the explanation because there are so many papers coming out every single day. And so at least for now, this is just yet another radio signal we cannot explain, located somewhere out there in the universe. Something I'm definitely going to follow up on in some of the future videos once more details are available. Until then, thank you for watching, subscribe, maybe share this with someone who loves learning about space and sciences, and maybe come back tomorrow to learn something else. Support the channel on Patreon by joining channel membership or by buying the wonderful person t-shirt you can find in the description. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.